think, page for recording. So we have a couple of updates to go through with you guys, obviously, and we'll ask, obviously, if you have any questions for us or future topics you want to discuss, we can discuss that at the end. First off, we're going to have Paige kick off our legislative updates. Paige, you want to go ahead and get started for us?
Yeah, thank you, Brandy. So moving into our wireless telecommunication bills, these are the ones that we've been tracking from the Cell Phone Interim Study Committee that met last summer. We have SB 2531. This is the single point of contact wireless services bill. And this bill was one that requires the CBO to provide technical assistance to applicants seeking grants for deploying wireless services. And this bill also requires certain requirements for emergency alert systems. OIT and CBO aren't actually implicated in that portion of the bill, but the bill did pass the House Business Affairs and Labor Committee on April 2nd and has been referred to the House Committee of the Whole. I'm not sure when it will be heard in the House, but it should be soon. And then the next bill we have is HB 251056. This is the Local Government Permitting Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Bill. So this bill, what it did was create a shot clock for local governments to approve or deny an application for wireless services. And when it was heard in the Senate, that was March 18th, Senator Winter passed an amendment that allows local governments to toll the period. There's certain circumstances that's in the amendment that they can do that. But when the bill was sent back to the House to consider that amendment, the House did not concur. So they did request a conference committee, and that committee will meet on Wednesday, April 9th at 8:15. So the bill is scheduled for House floor work on May 7th, which is the last day of session. And then the next bill that we have is HB 251080. So this is the Wireless Telephone Infrastructure Deployment Incentives Bill. And this bill did pass House Finance Committee with an amendment. So the first part of the bill allows local governments to provide property tax relief to communication service providers that expand a facility in an unserved or underserved area. And then the second part of the bill, if you recall, it related to the existing sales tax refund for rural broadband service providers. There was a fiscal note attached to it from the Department of Revenue. So they did end up amending that out, and it just amends the legislative declaration for that refund. So there's no longer a fiscal impact, so it doesn't require an appropriation. And that bill did pass the House on March 13th and has been assigned to the Senate Business, Labor, and Technology Committee. And then the Colorado General Assembly does adjourn on May 7th, so all bills need to pass the House and Senate by then. And we are having our broadband legislative stakeholder calls on Thursday, April 10th at 1 p.m. and Thursday, April 24th at 1 p.m. So register for those if you would like more updates, and happy to take any questions. Yes, Eric.
Remind me again where the CBO's current position is on all three of those. Is it for all three, or is there was one that you were at least taking a neutral position at the beginning, I feel like.
So on SB 2531, we were supportive of the amendment that passed. We thought it aligned well with HB 241336 that we passed last year with the high cost support mechanism funding going towards wireless services. And then the other ones we don't have a position on.
So effectively neutral, yeah. Yeah,
effectively neutral. Okay. We did have an opposition position to HB 251080 when the originally introduced bill gave high cost support mechanism funding to wireless services, but they amended that out, so it's a different bill now, and so now we have no position.
Okay, so that was the fiscal component that got taken out, so it would not be deriving funding from the cost support mechanism for it's incentivizing in other ways.
Yes, so this bill actually went through a strike below amendment. So the original introduced bill looks completely different than it does now. The original bill required us to create like a new program for wireless services to split the high cost support mechanism 50-50. So we opposed that, and then they drafted this new bill that has the two parts. So one's the property tax incentives for local governments, and then the other one was the sales tax refund for rural broadband services. So for that refund, we didn't take a position on that. It was Department of Revenue submitted the 3FT for it, but it wasn't impacting OIT or CBO in a fiscal way. So we didn't have a position. Once they did the strike blow amendment, we just had no position on the bill.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been my concern too, and I hadn't realized, I guess, that I haven't been keeping up that that high cost support mechanism component got struck, and you know, I think others have said, and you may have yourselves, that we do overlap into broadband or cellular services because of the broadband component, especially fiber to the towers. But even in my county that I'm predominantly responsible for, people just come to me with that kind of question. Is like, hey, what about cell phone services? Like, well, it's not exactly broadband, but it is a problem, and there's nobody in charge of it. So I, you know, understand how we get put in that position sometimes. But I was definitely concerned, even though I want progress on both those areas, that an already highly in demand, high cost support mechanism for like the state and local dollar grant was going to get further watered down by even more hands out. So making that a highly, maybe almost impossibly competitive grant program.
Yeah. Yes, Sandra.
So did you say that, so they'll no longer be using the funding from the high cost mechanism, and they'll be like subject to tax credits? Is that what I'm understanding the new language is?
Yeah, so they did not, they struck out the high cost support mechanism funding part of HB 25-1080. And for the tax incentives, it allows the local government, it doesn't require them, but it does allow them to provide property tax incentives.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify one point on the high cost support mechanism funding. Although, you know, this was the language was stricken out of this piece of legislation. I just want to remind people that when we overhauled the broadband deployment fund last year with 1336, we did expand eligibility to include wireless services in tier 2. And that is the 40% of the allocation of the funding for the high cost support mechanism. And yes, there are more demands and pressures on that fund. But you know, all of those grants are competitive, and they obviously would be, they could be awarded based on eligibility, based on needs, based on strategies, based on, you know, where we're targeting areas for connectivity. So if there's a scenario where there's a wireless project that rides on broadband that's funded in tier 1 because it's a middle mile, you know, project, you know, making sure that we're taking a holistic approach to all of our connectivity issues and initiatives in our state. So there is still an ability to fund wireless. It's a lot smaller of a piece of pie, but there is that ability whenever we launch that program next year.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. And I think Brandy, or is it Brian? Who am I passing it off to?
I can take it on, and then Brandy, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it's Brian. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? I'm having issues with my mic. Oh, hey guys. Hey, I'm having an issue with my mic. So Brian, it's Brian's turn, and Brian will that's round 2 update as well. Go ahead, Brian.
All right, thank you. And yeah, Brandy's having a few technical issues with the mic. She may be in and out. So, but yeah, I'm happy to provide folks with an update now. So obviously CBO is hard at work reviewing and curing all of our applications that are coming through. We cannot release any information on those at this time, but just as a quick recap, we have 96 applications from 22 different organizations requesting somewhere over $648 million. So quite a lot to get through. We are hard at work making sure we're reviewing all the accurate information that's been provided, aiming to kind of provisional award announcements to those applicants sometime in May. That's not set in stone yet, but that's our plan. Obviously, we have a very set federal deadline that we need to stick with. So we will work through those, and there will be a public comment period on those final announcements before we pass those on to NTIA in June. So that's about all I've got on those right now, but just be aware that, coming up in the future, we've got provisional award announcements we'll need to make as we finalize all of the applications. We'll get those out for public comment to, just get a feel from folks what they think. And then the final submission to the NTIA for approval is June 3rd of this year. So, and if anyone has any questions on that, feel free to ping me now or reach out later. That's no problem. Eric?
I do, and I'm passing on one for Ralph because he wasn't able to join us today. So, and it may be one based off of your first comments that you can't really comment too much on, but hey, I'm going to press where I can. So it sounds like, you're progressing through them, but any sense of how far along in that disparity of the 300 odd million between the request and what you had available that you're getting that down to? Is it, making headway, I guess, on, finding the overlaps and some of the other ways to get down to the actual amount that you had available to you? And how are you dealing with the technology preference question? And is it still heavily fiber? I think the last time you guys gave an update, it was still there was a few fixed wireless applications, but on balance, it was still a fiber heavy set of applications across the board from what I remember.
Yeah, I don't think that's changed too much in the sense that we're doing our best to review all of the applications that come through. There are preferences set in BEAD, and so far we're just trying to move along with what we've been given and following the guidance that we have right now. I do think we're making good headway. I can't go into any details on that right now, but yeah, I think for now, I think we're making good progress and we're doing our best to fill the gaps where we can. But I can't go into too much more detail on that. And as soon as we've got all that information finalized and reviewed, we'll make sure that it gets out to the public for comment and give you folks an opportunity to share your thoughts. So,
thank you.
If it's okay, I can move into CPF round 2, unless anyone has any final thoughts. Yeah, so if you hadn't seen it today, an email went out announcing the round 2 for CPF. This is a additional program that we have that has about 690,000 available. I did see some questions come out on that, and I certainly want to make sure that we answer those, but it is for CPF eligible entities. We did get a approval from the Treasury to allow, and Brandy, correct me on this language if this is not right, but it's applicants who met the requirements but were not funded in the first round. So this particular program would also be open to those in addition to those who have been awarded. This is primarily to expand on those grant projects that were funded or met the eligibility requirements, and just gives us an opportunity to kind of make sure we're spreading that funding as far as possible. A couple points I wanted to address, specifically match requirements. If the current award, for example, if you have a current award of 30%, you would need to at least meet that minimum. The round 2 funding is mostly available only for fiber. It's the focus is to connect additional unserved and underserved areas. And the evaluation will take place based on, we'll prioritize projects that are serving a small number of locations if it fits within the budget, rather than choosing a larger project. So we're doing our best to plug the gaps where we can and make sure those funds are utilized. If you didn't see that email, feel free to ping us and we can get that out to you. But the application window opens April 14th up until May 11th. And you can find all the information on the addendum that we submitted through our website as well. There is a challenge process that will be part of this as well, and that will start 10 days after the CPF round 2 grant awards are announced. You'll be able to submit challenges to the program for eligible entities who can submit challenges include internet service providers, local governments, and tribal entities there as well. So again, if you have any questions, please feel to reach out to the advance_CBO, or you can ping one of us directly, and we're happy to help you out. So.
Yeah, one point that I wanted to make, and you got that right, Brian. So I appreciate the summary. And this is supposed to be kind of a quick program where it's more line extension based. And so to pick up those remaining some locations that we're going to be left behind. I do know the timing with BEAD and CPF is always tricky, but I think all of us have learned that the timing for all these broadband programs are tricky. But that's what the challenge process is for. So we don't duplicate efforts or step on BEAD's toes and BEAD stepping on CPF toes, or reconnect or every other broadband program that's out there. So that's how we're going to manage that. One thing that we did reserve the right to, and it's not captured necessarily in this process, but if money does come back to us and we can turn it around really quickly, we will also entertain a round 3 if need be. Again, in the broadband grant space, sometimes projects do come back to you every once in a while. And in the spirit of trying to get the money spent and not giving any money back to the Treasury, we've also given ourselves the ability to do that in our CPF plan amendment to Treasury, which they approved. That is not part of this process, but it's just something that's in our back pocket. Again, timeliness is going to be important if there is a round 3, because that window is closing. And so that's something that we have out there, hanging out there, just to give us a plan, a backup plan to the plan. So you don't see it in this program, but it's something that we have the ability to do, just in case you guys had a question about that. We're all good so far with our awardees right now, but you never know. But we wanted to make sure we had that ability.
I did want to mention as well for you all, I'm sorry about that. There is a map that's going to be published this week regarding CPF eligibility. So that is our plan, is to get that out there, so folks who are considering applying have the most appropriate resources to submit an application. And then I think there was a question that popped in before this meeting about concerns over overlap between our round 2 program and BEAD, and just wanted to assure folks that we're doing our best to review everything we have to make sure there is no overlap. We have layers built upon layers in our maps, and we'll be reviewing all of the information we have to make sure that that's not an issue that comes up. So
yeah, that's a good point, Brian. And the timing of rolling this out is actually it's better than most timeframes, if you will, in terms of rollout. Waiting for all the BEAD applications to be reviewed, scored, ranked, and figuring out who our short list is before we accept BPF, a line extension round 2 program, so that we're not stepping on BEAD's toes. And again, that was really important. So we're kind of staging this in waves, if you will, to make sure that our data doesn't get mixed up with the current program, because we certainly don't want that. All right. Any other questions for Brian? Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. So I know there were some questions that people had submitted ahead of time, and we can go over those. or if you just want to ask it now, because we do have plenty of time. If you want to ask it now, I think there was a question about middle mile and some others. So I'll let you raise your hand if you have anything. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I'm willing. I saw Jeff got on there, so I was going to see if he was wanting to jump on first. But yeah, on middle mile, I know there's been several presentations given to maybe other audiences, maybe the JTC or something like that, too, to kind of get them up to date. But I mean, where we're at with that, I know some of it involves CDOT mapping of their fiber locations throughout the state right of ways of CDOT. I know some of it has to do with the park in Trinidad that's being built too. But what other middle mile, and I know that, having lost the person that was kind of in charge of that, it might have been set back a bit too. So I just wanted to know where we are with going towards a true middle mile program, and if that's still something we're seeing progress on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Eric. And middle mile is still very much part of our initiative, and we haven't slowed down because we lost a person in our office with expertise. Where we are with the middle mile program, and again, I think I mentioned this a while back, but this is going to take years to do. And so we're at the beginning stages, of course. And I finally got our RFPs approved by my agency. It's taken about, I don't know, 9 months. And there's a couple of reasons why. Mainly being that we haven't done this at OIT, and anytime we do something at the state we haven't done, you can add an extra year to the process. So even if another state has done it, we have to put the systems in place, and we have to convince a lot of people of what we're doing. So where we are with that is this month, and I know I've been saying it, we are going to open up that solicitation. There's a couple of challenges with the middle mile program. The state has no money to do middle mile programs. So other than what we have in our high cost support mechanism program for middle mile for grantees, there's no money for it. And so I was able to scrape some money, pinch some pennies, and prioritize certain things within our department in our department budget to make the RFP piece happen. And so, we're hitting a pretty big funding constraint on what we can do as a state. So I think that it makes the situation a little bit more tricky for us, and extends the timeline. Where CDOT's concerned, I do catch up with CDOT on a monthly basis to update them on where we are and get any updates from them. And they're still very much bought in. They helped us develop all the information for that RFP, so we're all on the same page. And so it's just really getting my agency to publish it. And so we're there, and it took a lot of back and forth. And we also needed to make sure that we had a proper IGA with CDOT, because that was going to inform our RFP process, because we didn't want to go back and try to make a square peg fit in a round hole for lack of thinking about it proactively. So there's been a lot of undertaking with staff, legal counsel, our procurement folks to get this up and running. So it takes a while to do things you haven't done. I'm gonna make sure we do it right. So that's where we are. I'm hoping to publish that this month. It'll be a vendor pool. So we'll be collecting. We'll be soliciting different types of vendors for different pieces. The strategy there versus before is that I don't think there's one vendor that can do everything in this program. I think it's going to take a lot of different specialties. And so we wanted to create some flexibility. So I added a little bit of time to this process because of that change, the change in approach. For example, your strategic planning person is not going to be able to be the network operator. And so of a middle mile program. That's just one probably not a great example, but we're creating a whole procurement around the entire program. And so that's where we ended. That's where I kind of switched gears, but everything's still very relevant. And we're going to execute upon it. There's a couple of steps with the network piece, the statewide infrastructure piece. I don't have a budget for that. So I'm doing some market research through our RFP process to figure out exactly what the state needs to make it happen. And then what type of budget we need. Because right now there's a lot of unknowns. But the one thing we do know is that we have to do that assessment and inventory. That's a little bit easier. But again, it all boils down to money. So that's where we are. The DNR project, we've been in contact with them and my staff. We had a meeting about 2 months ago with the DNR pilot. And they're on board. We have everything set up. Again, the budget is the hard part. We won't be able to execute that project until next year because of the funding piece of it. It's not as much as we thought it was going to be, which is fantastic, but it's still money we have to come up with. So we're hitting some serious funding constraints with anything that we can do in the middle mile program. So I just want to say that because I want to set people's expectations around it. It's not something that we're going to be able to handle right away. If anything, it's probably a 5-year runway. CDOT and the fiber leasing, and I know all the challenges with CDOT. Those will continue to be challenges until we figure out a legislative fix for some of that. They are motivated to do it. How motivated they are, obviously, we're competing with everything else in their world. So I don't want to cast any sort of, sadness on it middle mile, but we are moving towards it. You're not seeing anything because there's stuff happening behind the scenes, but it's going to be a while before the public sees progress on the middle mile piece. And the big piece is just funding. The state is in a pretty big budget crunch, and we're talking about restructuring, I don't know, our employment insurance, workers' comp, and all the things that are core to and that's just one example. I think we're going to do our best. We're going to be creative. That's one thing our department always does, CBO, or we're pretty creative. So we'll find ways to make it happen. It just isn't, the rollout's going to take longer just because of the funding that we don't have. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I
Probably
think I'll probably continue to press on that issue, even though I know it's as you say, it may take a while before it coalesces into its final form. Just because we need to know, I mean, not just the region that I support, the several regions that I support, but probably other places in the state as well. Because uncertainty, as we know in these times, provides uncertainty can stall progress sometimes, for lack of a better word. And so, if I think where we're probably, the best way that we can phrase it right now is that we're going on as if we are on our own in some of these areas that have market failure within rural Western Colorado, and probably similar things are being done elsewhere. And if I think all the work that we're doing could be useful to the CBO to see how we've addressed the network operations piece. And certainly you're correct in that it's not the same people that can do that as administer the financial component of maintaining a middle mile network as and deal with all the other legal issues and right of way issues that also, I mean, those are all different skill sets. And so we're addressing all those, but in our little microcosm of just one region or several regions that are banding together. But we want to know if there's anything being done at the state level. And really the funding is always the issue. The funding is what we probably need because things are expensive and IRUs are expensive, and refresh of equipment and this personnel that are capable of doing that kind of management, particularly the network operations component of it, are expensive. And so this is not something that the rural counties really just have themselves available either. So at some point I would like to, so we'll just keep track of it is probably the where you're at with that. So we align ourselves rather than doing parallel efforts that are going to be in conflict at some point. The other part is the long-term dedicated funding. And that's why I brought up the high cost support mechanism stuff so specifically, with relation to any other legislation that's going to continue or that is going to further dilute that amount. Because really, I think that that funding, while it does derive from at least cellular services, so those aren't diminishing, it's still not enough. And it needs to be looked at as far as like a dedicated funding mechanism to probably cellular and middle miles specifically and separately, that just the way that we did rural electrification and getting telephony throughout the more less urban areas of the country, 100 years ago, because now they're shifting, and those funding mechanisms that were built at one point are now not being replaced with their modern corollary of like streaming services or internet services. And I realize that and Jed probably is the one that really kind of could respond to that the most, but I think you're kind of beholden to what you're allowed to put on the bottom of someone's bill, and that may be coming all the way down from the federal level of what's allowed at the Colorado Universal Services Fund and high cost support funds that are on the bottom of the bill are limited. But I think we need something sustainable, and it's not something that the rural western and eastern or even front range areas are going to be able to do on their own. I just see that, and I see conflict coming to where we're going to build these great networks, and all of the grant opportunities that built them are not going to replenish the next round of equipment and services that those need to keep going, and they're going to collapse. And I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all aligned on that. Judd, do you have anything you want to offer up?
No, on
On
the USF fund, at least. The other day I got on this call a couple weeks ago, I guess, and I had watched the first part of the oral argument, and it looked kind of bad for USF. But then the second part, the defense of USF, the proponents of that came up, and I think most prognosticators think that USF will survive. It might even be like a 7-2 Supreme Court decision. So I think at least maybe USF is not going away yet. And maybe because it got a lot of attention, Congress might do something to fix it more permanently, or even adjust it, or, get it to where it should be. But so I'm just reporting a little bit of maybe good news. We'll see.
We'll take it where
Good
we can
news
get
is
it.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of you mentioned it, Eric, you opened up with uncertainty. I think for these conversations, there's uncertainty as well, with federal policy, but also the position that the state's in financially as well. I do agree there needs to be a sustainable funding source for middle mile, and the high cost support mechanism funding is not enough, and it continues to dwindle. So we're probably going to have some really interesting policy conversations next session around this subject specifically. And so there is hope that there is a little bit of a silver lining with all of the things that we're trying to fund. And after B, there's still going to be deficits, or not. There's still going to be people that are not connected, and we haven't addressed our middle mile problem in our state. I think there's a real case to be made for really looking at these initiatives and figuring out, well, how do we fund it. Funding is always tricky, though. When you talk about fees, people don't want fees. When you talk about taxes, people don't want taxes. So it's not an easy hill to climb, especially if we're if our economic situation gets turns out to be something that's not great for Colorado. Those conversations are hard. So we're tracking everything, and I think it's wise to not wait for the state, but keep us updated on what you guys are doing in your region as far as middle mile. I would say don't wait for us, because I think if you wait, you're going to be waiting for a long time. But we definitely want to make sure that we collaborate so that we're in alignment with the strategies that you guys are working on. and initiating. So I think that's a good approach for you guys. Anything else? Anybody have anything else they want to talk about besides middle mile or anything? Can always give you back an extra. Okay, go ahead, Sandra. You go ahead.
Yeah, real quickly. I know that Colorado is far along in the process as far as what the state has done and gotten approved. But do you foresee or anticipate any changes from the new administration and the Department of Commerce as far as funding is concerned, or rules or policy changes?
Yeah, I think that's the question of the first half of this year, Sandra. I think we're all anticipating changes. You know, we have been told that there are changes that are going to be coming, but we don't know what those are yet. And I know we have some. And I think we'll probably see them in the next 30 days because, to your point, there's a lot of states that are out there with their subrecipient selection process. We also have states that have had approval of their final proposal or are submitting them. Colorado's, we're going to be submitting ours in May. And so, in a couple weeks. And so they need to come up with something soon. I think what we're hoping is that they don't change the program to the extent that we have to start over. And what I mean by that is changing the scoring criteria. We can look at regulations, for example, the environmental assessment, historical preservation pieces, like we can look at those, without having to substantially change our program. But if they start, if the administration starts going in and saying, okay, it's no longer a fiber preference, it's another alternative technology preference, we would literally have to start over because we have scored everybody fairly across the current criteria, which is fiber first. And I will say that, there's been a lot of talk around technology neutral. The law was written to be technology neutral. And so we verified that. We look at it all the time as states like, look, this is technology neutral. Our program was technology neutral. And we do have, fixed wireless and satellite participating in our BEAD program. So, we and that's because Colorado's a really challenging place, a state to do broadband. So, we've always been technology neutral. There's probably, from what I gather, I don't claim to know everybody's program plan for BEAD, but I do know that some states were more restrictive when it came to maybe technology that wasn't fiber. So I don't know where those states are, but I think we're gonna see some changes. I just don't know when. I think for us, it's been a little bit of it's been sort of the unknown. Managing the unknown has kind of left us a little not rattled, but just kind of wanting to hurry up and get those guidance out so we can communicate with our stakeholders and include it in our plans. But I would say I'm hoping in the next 30 days we see something. Will we have a say in it? I have no idea. The NTIA's program is very prescriptive, and I anticipate the new changes will be very prescriptive. But there is an effort across the nation, especially a lot of the states that are ahead or in districts where there's a lot of folks. Well, there's a lot of districts that are unserved, but a lot of states that are there's been an advocacy push to not stop the program and change everything, because if they do that, there's been conversation of how long it'll take for states to come on to implement. People say, oh, it'll be 12 months. For us, it's more than 12 months. Managing $826 million. And the reality of us doing that over again is a minimum of 2 years based on everything that we've had to do to get to even to this point. So we're hoping that we don't have to do that. And we also do not have we've already executed our administrative spend plans to get to this point, so there would be no money for us to start over. So, and the state doesn't have cash to step in to do that. So at that point, it'd be truly an unfunded mandate to redo the program. But I don't have any specifics for you, Sandra. So, and when we do, we'll let folks know. But right now, I don't have any insight or any visibility into what those changes are beyond just rumor mill and speculation. So, hoping we can stay the course.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they want to discuss or talk about or? So we'll meet again, and on our next agenda, we'll probably have more specifics around. We'll definitely have more specifics around BEAD. So I know we've been a little hush hush on. We can't share anything, which, from a transparency perspective, feels really weird to us because we're usually really transparent. But we also take our marching orders from the NTIA. But we'll have more specifics for you all once we're finished with our full analysis. And again, we can't really say who the companies are until we put out our final proposal. But we're really, really excited to share with you the results of where we landed on BEAD. And again, it'll be preliminary because nothing's permanent until you sign the dotted line. But I'm happy to finally share those details with you guys because it's been a long time coming. So, but yeah. If nobody has anything else, we can go ahead and give you guys a few minutes back of your day. And obviously, if you have any questions between now and the next time we meet, please reach out. And we'll hopefully you guys have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.